power outages, difficult for a lot of the declaration of a statewide emergency. We haven't done that very often. It's really important. So we are monitoring the needs at the county level. Our work, federal government to make sure things will happen. But I just want to make sure that everyone, it's been hard on a lot of folks. We're still recovering. Businesses are still recovering, paying attention. I also think it, to all of our knowledge that we all have to be prepared for these types of state, what can we do to help resilient? So that is something we will be focused on, but we're very well aware that things are still recovering. When we met a couple weeks ago, I spoke directly about this that we're seeing in the first year around the emergency declaration on the homeless state of emergency. And I just want to reiterate that bringing an emergency management issue has made sure that 10,000 households here in Oregon have a warm place to sleep by preventing their homelessness, but also making sure parenting on shelter homelessness get into housing. Because particularly we see the stark realities when these are the kind of results that I'm focusing on, Governor, and you won't be surprised by some of the things. While we have to continue to push to make sure our statewide system of services for experiences strong, we know she's making sure we have more. We have a critical shortage of housing supply across the state. That is why, as I've been saying, my one focus for the legislative session is to put as much as possible into the effort. Production. Decades of underbuilding have really impacted our ability all over the state. Folks with good jobs can't find housing. Folks who are struggling with affordability. It is an issue around this. So we know that this session, I know, the bill that we're working on has to make it through the legislature because it's a set of tools that we need to jumpstart our housing production. That is the ultimate solution and homelessness crisis across our state. So Senate Bill 1537 is my bill for the session. And as those you know, the governor doesn't have an endless number of bills. I made the choice to have one bill per session, Senate Bill 15. It is a comprehensive approach to jumpstart housing production that I am working hard with legislators for their support to get it done. It's been 7 months of collaborative conversations with housing organizations, build housing, cities, conservation groups, the whole gamut of folks who care about this bill. We have been talking for months. Bring the right set of tools, right set of investments that we need to improve housing production. So Senate Bill 1537 has a menu of things that we need. One of those is the establishment of the Housing Accountability Office to work directly with local communities, providing technical assistance, providing things like ready-built plans and model codes where communities can adopt so they can streamline and expedite housing. That office is going to bring a new sense of state direction and partnership with local governments so we can move faster on our housing production. You've also heard in Senate Bill 1537, the conversation about a tool boundary expansion. I want to be clear, it is one part of the bill. Land supply is a conversation we need to have. And what the tool does is a one-time tool for cities who are in need of land and affordable housing, be able to add land to their urban growth boundary for housing. And they must meet both a land need and an affordable housing need to be able to use that tool. The urban growth boundary tool requires 30% of new development within these expansion areas to be affordable, which would be one of the strongest requirements in the country for new development. The bill also includes climate incentives to make sure in that new development that we are doing the types of homes that will have benefit over the long term from a climate perspective and an energy efficiency. And Senate Bill 1537 includes a $500 million investment package from existing state resources. To make that clear, I believe we have the resources to do that. Fund the housing production tools, including the financing for housing infrastructure, moderate income housing financing, site acquisition, and the local technical assistance that I've talked about with our governments. We need affordable land in order to build. I know I've been asking the last couple of days about where we were from last session to this bill. Again, I want to emphasize 7 months of lots of conversation to create a bill that is balanced and make sure it upholds our land use values here in the state. There were specific compromises made on the urban growth boundary tool, so I just want to point out from the previous bill, because some people are like, is this the bill from last session? It is not the bill from last session. We added a demonstration of need or the eligibility to use the urban growth boundary tool. We added the accountability metric around the 30% of housing in that new development. The UGB tool also requires cities to meet land and housing affordability. Again, 2 metrics to make sure that if it is utilized, it is having the impact it needs to have. And the bill to address environmental concerns, conservation concerns, ensures that mandatory design and development adjustments not apply to natural. We can do this. We can have a tool around urban growth that is targeted, that meets affordability goals, that protects our environment. That is what is in this bill. Now, Senate Bill 1537 is now in the legislative process. It's in the Senate. I want to thank the Senate President, Rob Wagner, Senator Casey Jama, the chair of the Housing Committee in the Senate, who are working to find middle ground as the bill is developed further to get it across the finish line. And I have the utmost confidence that the Senate is trying to hear from all sides in a final amendment to make sure this bill can get to this session. Here's what I know. Oregonians know the status quo is not housing production. We feel it every day in our. This bill is a pathway to provide the tools that we need in the state. I want to talk about a couple more things from the session. The housing production is obviously the focus of the session, and we are continuing to focus on the infrastructure around homelessness in the state. The $100 million ask to continue to support the shelter services and the prevention of homelessness. There's a $65 million request to stabilize our existing shelter system. We have known that the more we learn about shelters in our communities, that some have been funded in different ways. $65 million that's being requested will be make sure that across the state, communities that have stood up shelter capacity and shelter services. Right? We saw in this winter storm events that we had that those shelters are used. So we want to make sure we can do that. There's also a $35 million ask to continue to invest in prevention. It is the most affordable way to help people who are housing insecure is to make sure they don't become. So more work on the prevention system. A couple other things about session that I'd like to touch on. Last year, we made great progress in the investments around early literacy. As I said a couple weeks ago, all school districts in the state have put in for applying for the money. And that is a huge step forward. But we also know, and we see it in the graduation rates, that we need to do more for our students who are still coming out of the impacts of the pandemic. One of those things is to make sure that we are providing more summer learning opportunities. It's been my pleasure to partner with Representative Susan McLean, who's working on a bill for summer learning for this summer to make sure communities can do more, because we know that those summer supports are not only good for academic progress for our kids, they're also helpful in building social and emotional skills that will also help them. Lastly, I just want to come back to yesterday's announcement regarding the 90-day state of emergency fentanyl crisis in collaboration with the city of Portland and Multnomah County. That is an effort, again, to bring an emergency framework, make sure all the existing resources around today can be better integrated, better aligned, to really improve on what we're doing in Central City, and then to model that in other places. I believe that metrics and about what is happening in the Central City and show impact not only on a broader community safety aspect, but what it means for the looking for pathways to. We have to make it clear. I don't want fentanyl being sold in our. We have to hold dealers accountable. We need the legislature to step up to make sure we have additional tools to those dealers accountable. It is up to us to come together as a state to make sure we identify and step forward of investments we need in services. Frankly, all governments have to be working to get this work. So there's a lot going on outside of the legislative session. So with that, be happy to take some questions.
Governor, you've been non-committal around recriminalizing possession of drugs. You said in December, I want to see what the legislature sends me. It's pretty clear what they're talking about right now. So I'd expect you have a little better idea of where you stand. What's your position on the Democrats' bill and some of the pushback to that it's not strong enough?
First of all, I want to thank legislators for really grappling with what is a complex set of issues. And I think they're moving in the right direction. Say that up front. And as I mentioned yesterday, things change as a legislature. They start at one place. There is a lot of work yet to do. My staff is tracking and reviewing the different changes. And I also want to say, in what we're hearing from the joint, I know there's a lot of focus on it, but I would hope everybody looks at this as a comprehensive. It is about what you do on the front end as it relates, for example, to the misdemeanor, but it's also about connecting people with services, making sure we're planning better, making sure we're making it. What I'm focusing on right now, as I continue to follow what is going on, we're focusing on what the capacity needs are for treatment. Because I believe the legislature is going to recommend changes that will be incumbent upon us to make sure there are more opportunities for recovery. So my job right now is to make sure, where are we under the Oregon Health Authority? What resources are available? What more? Where do we need placement of services? That is what I'm focused on right now, so that I can walk outside that proposal from the Joint Committee, so we make the right choices by the end of session. So again, it's a complex proposal, and I'm watching it evolve, and we'll see where it ends up.
But I'm hearing you say you envision yourself potentially signing a bill that includes recriminalization. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I want to see a proposal that answers a set of questions. One piece will be recriminalization, but if we just look at recriminalization in isolation, I think it's missing. So my question is going to be like, if you make a change, legislature, and you're suggesting a change, what else are you going to do different to make sure we have better health? So to me, it's an interrelated.
Christina? Are you aware of the differences in opinion when it comes to what level of recriminalization the legislature is calling for, Democrats or Republicans? What are you doing right now to make sure that doesn't lead?
Well, as it relates to the law potential, I've been in contact with Republicans. I want to commend all of the legislative leaders for having, I think, very productive conversations about how we can work together. What I'm hearing is, while they might disagree on policy, everyone is focused on showing up for work and getting the job done. So I'm not concerned that policy differences are going to lead to what we saw in last year's session.
Governor, you have a whole list of financial requests on housing, but none for just the Measure 110 rehabilitation capacity, that kind of thing. Speaker Rayfield says we're probably gonna need some more money for that, but you haven't proposed any, and he didn't have a figure. Is that something you're going to be negotiating with them, since I presume the state's going to be spending some of that money either directly or with providers in local government?
My goal is to make sure legislature, if they move to allocate more money to treatment services, make the best choices possible. I've spent close to a year with our new leadership at the Oregon Health Authority to try to understand what is our current capacity. We releasing soon the first set of information we have from a regional perspective of what is our system. And so if the legislature says we want to spend more money, I want to be able to say, here's where you should spend it, because here's what we know. I don't want the legislature to say, here's, a couple $100 million, figure it out. We should know what the plan is, and I want to we're going to provide, better understanding for legislators so they're making choices.
They're not suggesting they're gonna hand you $100 million, $200 million.
I actually have not heard a figure, but when they do have a figure, they're probably going to say, well, we need more treatment. I say, well, here's the list. Here's what we need. Here, and then we can put a price tag on that. That's what we're trying to have ready for them. And frankly, we are scrambling to have that. Connor?
Back to measure 110, just really quick, I understand as a comprehensive package that's being discussed, you list the details, but are you committed to signing some sort of measure 110 bill of whatever comes out of the legislature?
If it's a bill that I think will have the outcomes we need, I'm committed to making sure we can move.
What in that bill would it hold you back from signing something?
Again, to the other question, I want to make sure that all parts of the bill make sense and we're actually going to have outcomes. The issue of addiction and the need for pathways to recovery should not be a political focus. We should understand any changes that we're making and that it will improve the lives of Oregon. And that's the filter I'm going to bring to them. And I think that's what legislators are trying to do. They are hearing a lot of perspectives. We know there's a ballot measure out there that people are, let's do this right. Let's make sure we're going to help people with changes coming. That's the filter I'm going to.
Ben?
Governor, back in 2021, the legislature approved a little over $1 billion for behavioral health services. About a year or so later, there was frustration about how long that money took to get out the door. With this situation now, what needs to happen to avoid a repeat of that situation and actually get the money out?
Well, one of the things that I talked about on the campaign trail, and I think on and off in my first year, is it is not just about new money. Let's make sure that the money that we have invested, we're right. I was a part of that $1 billion investment in 2023. In my budget, we saw a continued commitment into this biennium for that level of funding. I've been asking questions of the agency. Well, how are we funding? What are we paying for? What's the pipeline? How long is it going to take? Do we have the different pieces of the treatment available? That's the kind of information you're going to see coming out from the Oregon Health Authority here in the coming weeks, and we can answer that question. It is not just about throwing money at something. It must be strategic about how we invest.
Jake?
Governor, on that report, so I understand that the preliminary reports that we come out in January about substance use capacity. The final report's not going to come out until April. Is that going to be a problem with the legislative session coming up? Not having that before.
You always wish you have every bit of information available at the start of session. I do believe that the first phase of that report is going to be the critical information we need to help the legislature make a good decision. And then there is, as you mentioned, a follow-up piece by the middle of the year that will further elaborate on that. And so we're going to hopefully keep that in mind and make good choices. But yeah, I wish that we had it all right now, but we're going to have more information this month than we have had probably. So that is a good place to be at the beginning of the session.
Someone who hasn't gone yet, please. Dick?
Governor, going back to your housing bill, the counting votes is everything. Do you have the votes yet for the bill as is? Changes to be necessary to get the votes to pass it?
Well, the bill that as introduced, and I'm still like trying to remember the number, 1537, right? The bill is introduced. It's a product of a lot of hard work, right? So I think it's a very good starting place, but no bill is perfect on day one. I am relying on the Senate, Senator Jama, Senate President, to make sure that if there are any additional changes, that it can get across the finish line. I fully expect some technical changes in the bill. I assume we will continue to have some negotiated conversation about further refinement of the duty. And I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the idea that we would not pass a substantial bill this session. And I've been very clear with our legislators, we need to get it done. I expect we'll see some changes. I'm open to those. I respect the legislative process and that they're having those conversations right now to see how the bill can get finished and across.
Don't know your name, but you?
Claire,
Claire.
what are the climate incentives?
Yeah, it's, there's $20 million included in the package for working for new housing development, some additional incentives for energy efficiency in the construction, in the appliances, to make sure that these are more energy efficient and climate friendly homes. It dovetails nicely with some existing programs already that we are doing across the state that we could expand with that 20 million. So we can get you more information.
Lauren.
I'm curious about the Housing Accountability Office. Do you envision that being housed in OHS and the role being to work with cities and counties to streamline bureaucracy, or like what's their actual task going to be?
Currently, the office is structured as kind of co-led by DLCD. Yes. If you think about it, there's the planning element that cities have to go through, and there's the around making sure they have what they need from an investment side from OHC. So it is a joint effort, and I can get you more details, but think about it this way. We haven't had an office in our state, in other states have this, that is particularly focused on saying, here are the laws on the books. Here are the options you have to develop in your community. We will now, if the bill passes away, have an office that says, we're here to be a friend. If you have issues, we're going to provide technical assistance. Need model plans, here you go. If you're trying to build and you're having challenges, we could be that intermediary, that mediation service as well. We don't want there to be any barriers for us to get to construction and under the laws we currently have, right? And this is an office that's going to be providing a lot more hands-on approach than we currently have. And I think that is something that is missing. Left it up to the local government, and they've done the job that they can do with their resources. The state has to step up and say, we are going to walk with you to you can actually. It's not just up to you. It's up to us as your state partner.
Christina.
Yeah, with the Oregon Housing Stability Council, Oregon Housing Community Services, what role do you think that agency plays in holding developers accountable for livability standards?
Tell me what you mean by livability.
So if there's a developer that is not taking care of issues at a building that it owns and has developed, do you believe that Oregon Housing and Community Services should continue tax breaks to the city?
I think I'll have to get back to you on that, but what I will say is there's a set of expectations and requirements that come with state resources, whatever program they're in, when you're building affordable housing. How you maintain rents and other things, ability to term. But let me get back to you on that. We obviously have a role as a funder, but it's not just up to the state as a funder, because oftentimes these state is one funder. They're not the only funder. There's also the obligation of local governments to make sure that housing is maintained, is livable, is meeting health and safety issues. That is a local issue. So it's more of a partnership than the state coming in as a funder. So I can get back to you on that. It's a little more complicated than a yes or no.
Sure.
Governor, I think I asked you this before, but I'm still interested in the answer. We talked a lot about the $600 million for housing and homelessness, but we know that there's other things that you have in mind, right? Like I think $20 million for ODOT for graffiti trash cleanup. I don't know if there's money that you are going to be looking for the Portland Emergency Command Center, but I'm guessing that you have some other financial asks that you're going to be making in the session. It'd be helpful to have a broader picture about how much you think is appropriate in sort of new spending this session.
Well, I've been clear with legislative leaders that their job is to do the budget. My job is to make sure I explain what I think the needs are. We went to our agencies and said, are there some things you need adjusted in the short session? Continue to do your work. There are some individual asks across. That's pretty useful. That's pretty common to have that. Clearly, the $500 million for the housing production bill, as well as $100 million, very clear. I think we all agree those are priorities. We have unspent money last biennium that we can access. Had a good revenue forecast. I don't believe this is the moment to be cautious. But our bond rating is good, have resources, don't need to raise taxes, just have to make sure that we're putting things in the. I also want to make sure we're not doing a bunch of new things because they sound good. Let's focus on housing, let's focus on behavioral health, let's focus on summer learning. I've been very clear with that this isn't a fancy session. Let's stick to the basics, let's get them funded. And
Well, for instance, what's your summer learning ask then? I'm just trying to get a broader picture of like how much governor thinks.
The summer learning ask is $50 million. We're done in McLean. And to give you some context, that's substantially less than what we've done in the 2 summers during the. As you know, the legislature did not allocate last summer. But what we've heard from people, even if it's $50 million, that can be leveraged with existing federal dollars that they have, money that they have. It will provide more opportunity for students to get the additional summer opportunities they need to be ready for this next year. So I'm hoping the legislature can get there. I think it's needed. But I also will say, going in, if I can project into 2025, we as a state have to have a better conversation about how summer academics. It's that simple. We know that learning loss over the summer, particularly for underrepresented groups, key, making sure that we're going to see better outcomes. We have to figure out how we did to summer learning. Other states do it much better than we. As we learned in the pandemic, is that this is really. So I would anticipate a conversation in the 25 session about ongoing.
But you also promised a discussion about school funding for this session. We have not heard that. What is that going to look like?
Well, remember, in the commitments we made after the PPS strike, there were several things there directed towards 2025. So looking at the funding formula, working with partners to say, do we have it right? Does it need to be more? We'll be coming out with a proposal to talk about how do we support schools and on their mental well-being. That's an important piece. And then there is an ask for this legislative session, it's a small ask from the department around transparency. We saw in the strike, that maybe confusion about what money was available, what was spent. We have an ask in for an Office of Transparency in the Department of Education that will allow us to have more real-time data online going forward to answer some of these questions. It will take a little bit of an investment, but that is the one kind of forward-looking ask for this session to make sure we're ready in 2025 to have some of the bigger conversations. Julia. Hi, Julia.
Following up on Mark's question, do you have a clearer picture yet of level of funding you need for shelters, which started in the last couple of years, and ones that will that go beyond 100 million for?
So I want to thank the legislature during last year's session to make sure across the biennium, the new shelter capacity that we stood up was funded. We said to communities, if you're going to stand up a new shelter and new service, you're going to sustain it through the biennium. And then after that was managed, we went back to the agency and said, we need to find out what other people are doing. Because what we were hearing was, hey, we did this and did that without state money. This is also important in our communities. So the $65 million ask is the result of the inventory that the agency across the state to say, if by the end of the biennium, we're going to have a baseline of services for folks who are experiencing homelessness. They're going to look like this, and this is what it costs to pay for it. That's why you see the $65 million ask, because there were some pieces left out, folks who hadn't been getting any state funding. We also realized that we could use more in the prevention side, hence the 35. I'd like to end the biennium going into 25-27 and saying, we now know what the baseline cost of a statewide infrastructure for housing insecure and experience actually is, and that we can measure it, we can understand where we're going. I don't necessarily want to build it any bigger, but I want to make sure that we can sustain it until we get the housing we need off the streets and permanent. So hopefully that makes. This is a multi-year conversation.
We're a minute over, so.
And I don't want to keep it from your legislators. They're a lot more interesting than I.
Can I have a quick follow-up to her question?
Sure.
With that funding, what role do you think the state should play in the overall picture of homeless services? And is it a percentage of other funding?
I don't think we have figured that out. But I will say the state as a more directive partner partner in being an ongoing funder, as well as requiring certain types of data to be collected. Who's being served? How are they being served? What outcomes are you seeing? I think the biggest challenge we've had over the last several years in the state is we haven't been educated. We are bringing a systemization to this network of support in a way that I think is going to allow us to have better outcomes. So I think remains to be determined what that percentage of state support. This isn't a state thing, it's not a local thing, it is a true partnership. It's across the state, and hopefully we can maintain that and articulate that we're making progress by what we do. So thanks for the question.
Being put towards the systemization though.
Well, maybe we can follow up on that. Thank you. I know you need to get to your next group, so really appreciate it. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you, Governor.